Good evening, everybody. A
Evening.
little bit after 6:30. I think we're still getting people very actively adding on, so let's wait a minute or two. Okay. Well, it's 6:31. It looks to me like we have a quorum, or I think we've got a little bit more than a quorum. I think there'll be a few additional people adding on. But let me call the meeting to order. And Nellie, can we do a roll call, please?
Absolutely. When I call your jurisdiction, please state your name. San Mateo County,
Dave Pine.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Rick DeGolia,
Belmont,
Julia Mates,
Brisbane,
Colleen Mackin,
Burlingame,
Donna Colson,
Colma,
Raquel Gonzalez,
Daly City,
Rod Das Megwal,
East Palo Alto, Foster City, Half Moon Bay,
Harvey Rohrback.
Hillsborough,
Lawrence May.
Los Banos,
Tom Faria.
thank you. Menlo Park,
Betsy Nash,
Mowbray, Pacifica,
Niagara Jazz Big Stick.
Portola Valley,
Jeff Elfs,
Redwood City, San Bruno,
Marty Medina.
San Carlos,
John Dugan,
San Mateo, South San Francisco,
Flor Nicholas,
Woodside, and Director Emeritus. And Director Emeritus.
John Keener.
Wonderful.
I think we have Redwood City here.
you do indeed, with a few tech issues that I'm working out.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
We have a
Okay.
quorum.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nellie. Is there any public comment? I haven't seen public comment. If you see any, let me know, Nellie. If anyone has public comment, they can either click the reactions button and raise your hand or just speak out and let us know. Looks like we don't have public comment, so I would like to take an action to set the agenda and approve consent items. If anyone wants to address any of the consent items, please let me know.
motion to set the agenda and approve the consent items 1 through 5.
Okay,
Donna Colson, Burlingame.
thank you, Donna. Can I get
Second.
a
Nicholas second,
And Fleur Nicholas seconded that. Could we please have a roll call?
Just one moment. San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma,
yes,
Daly City,
yes,
East Palo Alto, Foster City, Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos,
Yes.
Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae, Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
yes,
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
yes,
San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco,
Yes.
and Woodside. Okay, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the chair report. I really don't have anything of substance. I'd just like to remind board members that the November and the December meetings, because of the holidays, are not on the fourth Thursday of the month. In November, the meeting is on November 18th, and in December, the meeting is on December 16th. Also, Jeff and I attended a conference, can you believe it, an in-person conference at Cal, sponsored by the Energy Institute Power Conference. It was a pretty interesting conference. So it was a lot of students, a very, I'd say, wonky conference, very technical, very AI and data oriented, focused on distributed energy resources.
It was my kind of conference.
Yeah, Jeff totally ate it up. It was pretty interesting to me. The most interesting item in the conference was that there was, for me, was that there was a panel that Grish, who's the CEO of Silicon Valley Clean Energy, was on, and a member, one of the commissioners from the PUC was on it, and then another very wonky guy. And it was focused on distributed energy resources. Grish was extremely well-centered. I thought that he spoke very well. Everything he said related to our experience. The rest of it was very technical, interesting, but very technical. So there you have it. That's my report. Next item on the agenda is the CEO report.
Thank you, Rick. That was a short report tonight. Next slide, please. Thank you all for coming. It's always great to see you here. Wanted to update you on some of our staffing. So we have been successful in recruiting for a community relations person for Los Banos, and Sandra Benetti, who formerly worked for the city of Los Banos, is joining PCE as our associate manager of community relations in Los Banos. She'll be starting on Monday officially, but actually last Saturday, she and Kirsten went to an event in Los Banos and did a lot of outreach there. So we're very excited to have Sandra joining us. The second person joining us is Blake Hershoft, who will be starting at the end of November in the role of the Building Electrification Programs Manager. And Blake has been working with us as one of the consultants with DNV, and he's decided to come over to PCE because we're doing such great work. So we're excited to have Blake join us at the end of the month, end of next month. And then we had a procurement or a posting for an account services analyst to join Leslie's team for account services. And we're in the process of finalizing the hire there. So next month, or in our weekly newsletter to you, we'll give you the details of who's joining us. We're not quite ready to announce, but the position is in the process of being filled. So we're very glad to have had these successful recruitments. Next slide, please. We are now starting recruitment for Chief Operating Officer, and I sent you all an email last night about the reasons for this. We're going to be bringing on a search firm to help with this effort, and if you have some suggestions on search firms that you've found to be helpful, we would love to get that input. And then the last thing I wanted to report about is for CC Power, California Community Power, the JPA that we're engaged in with 10 other CCAs, has issued a request for offers for 200 megawatts of firm clean resources. And what this means is renewable resources that are meet the California RPS eligibility requirements and have an 80% capacity factor. And they cannot be energy storage. So the picture here is of a geothermal plant. So something like geothermal, biogas, biomass that has a high capacity factor, meaning it can operate pretty much as a firm resource, meets this requirement. So we're doing this RFO along with the other CCAs because we all have this requirement to meet a requirement, which actually Siobhan will be going over with later on this evening. And then lastly, just the list of the next meetings. In November, everything's kind of moved up a week because of Thanksgiving. So we'll see you at the Audit and Finance Committee and the Executive Committee on November 8th and the Board of Directors meeting at November 18th. And of course, everyone's always invited to our Citizens Advisory Committee, which will be held on November 4th. So that's all I have for tonight. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
If anyone has a question, please raise your hand through reactions or just speak out. Tom.
Yeah, I was going to ask a little bit about the other sources of energy, because the University of California at Merced, MCAG, or COG, was looking at a deal with them to provide them the natural gas to run to their school, to the university there from our landfill. We've got to get natural gas we have to get rid of. And so there have been a lot of studies already done. And so I don't know if there's a use in the system for natural gas, but Merced County Association of Governments has been researching, the possibility of finding it. So if there's anyone out there that's interested in that sort of thing, then let me know and we'll connect up with the COG. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. For us, we're not looking for natural gas resources because we're looking to be all renewable or all GHG free, and natural gas doesn't fit either of those definitions.
Right.
But, thanks. Yeah, thanks for letting us know.
The other forms of power, and so just in case, because we got to find a way to get rid of that gas, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, is that it for your report, Jan?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the next item is the Citizens Advisory Committee report. I haven't looked. Is Ray on the line? Yeah, I don't see Ray. Is Morgan on the line? Is there a report from the Citizens Advisory Committee tonight? Okay, I think we maybe don't have a report from the Citizens Advisory Committee tonight.
I can quickly report out in their stead since the chair and vice chair aren't on.
Yeah, great. Go ahead.
Sure, that the Citizens Advisory Committee passed a resolution at the previous meeting recognizing the former chair, Deai Rfp, who's done such a fantastic job. As 2 terms as the chair of the CAC, as well as being very involved in educational programs in the county and community outreach for PC since the very beginning. So the text of that resolution is included in your agenda packet tonight. And so so we just, the CAC was very grateful for her service. I also heard a report from from some of our staff, and I'll leave it to Ray and Desiree to report out in the next meeting.
Great. Okay, sounds good. Next item on the agenda is approval of the audited financial statements for fiscal 2021.
Chair DeGolia, you
Yes.
do have some hands raised from board members. I don't know if
Oh,
you've seen them.
okay, I didn't see that. Let's see.
I think I'm one, Rick.
Okay, go for it, Rick.
Yeah.
For some
Thank
reason,
you.
I'm not seeing them. Yep, go, please.
Yeah, so I just want to mention, when we were unable to raise anybody from the CAC, that I actually had difficulty getting on because the Zoom link was asking for a password. And so I had to go back and search the email. Finally, I saw one there and put it in, and which is unusual. It's new, it's different. So some people might not be here because of that.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Tom, is your hand raised or is that from your previous comment? I think you're muted, Tom, but I show your hand raised.
I thought I had taken it down.
Yeah, no problem.
And actually, Tom, I just wanted to clarify, did you say landfill gas or natural gas?
It's coming from the landfill. It's
Oh.
natural, coming from the landfill.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misheard you.
Oh,
So that is something we could definitely follow up on.
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
The landfill is quite large, so it reaches a threshold where you have to find something to do with that gas, so.
Okay, we'll follow up with you on that. Thank you.
Right.
Okay. So we're moving on to item number 9, which is the audited financials. And I assume that's Andy.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This will hopefully be a very short report, an item, although there's the length of time to bring this to you was not short. We started the audit process back in July and completed it just recently. Next slide, please. This is a picture of the quarterly report updated for June. There's a little bit of feedback. Not sure you can hear me. Okay. The red arrow at the top there is pointing to the final financials. We produced a similar report for the board's package in the August timeframe, August meeting. And on the far right, that was a preliminary year-end financials. On the far right, I've noted the places that have changed since the preliminary financials were produced, and now these are the final audited ones. Revenues are slightly higher, very small amount relative to 228 million. Expenses are $2 million lower as we firmed up our estimates and accruals, and that overall made the change in that position $2.4 million higher. That is slightly less negative than it was. So we ended up at a change in that position for the year of 8.273 million, which was very close to our budgeted level a year ago. Next slide, please. At the last Audit and Finance Committee meeting, our auditors, the partner from our audit firm, Pacenti and Brinker, as well as the audit manager, presented their required communications. This is the list of required communications. Basically, everything is as expected. Unmodified opinion, no significant deficiencies. We follow all of the appropriate accounting policies. There are no significant or unusual transactions, and there were no disagreements with management. These are required independent auditor communications to the board that were communicated by the partner at the Audit and Finance Committee. Next slide, please. In summary, at our October 12th Audit and Finance Committee meeting, there were 3 parts to it. We reviewed the draft financial statements with the Audit and Finance Committee. Following that presentation and the required communications, all staff exited the the call, and the auditors met with two of the Audit and Finance Committee members separately, so that there wasn't a quorum to have a private conversation to express potentially any concerns. I would defer to Donna Colson and or Larry May. Larry May is the chair of the Audit Committee, to express anything that they want to out of that meeting. And after, and I'll do that in a second, after they met or before they met with the auditors, the committee approved unanimously a resolution recommending approval by the board tonight. And then the audit was completed and signed off on October 21st. That was the date of a week ago that the final financials were signed off by the auditors, and that was included in your package. Next slide, please. So our recommendation is that the board approve the audited financial statements for the fiscal year 2020-2021 as presented. And before you go there, you might ask Mr. May if there's anything he would want to report to the board.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Yes, Donna and I did meet with outside audit staff once our staff left the Zoom call. And that gives us the opportunity to ask any questions we want to that we would feel uncomfortable if staff was present. And it gives the outside auditors a chance to tell us anything that they won't want to say in front of our own staff. And, you know, as in past years, Andy and his team do just a great job of compiling our financial statements, not only on an annual basis, but on a monthly basis as well. So neither Donna nor I had any questions other than asking is there anything we need to know? The outside audit team had nothing to tell us. We had nothing to tell them. We were just highly complimentary of both inside and outside audit procedures. So we were pleased with where we're going. I think there were some issues concerning continuity on outside audit staff, and we've resolved those. So I think we're looking good going toward the future. But again, we really appreciate everything that our staff does to make our committee's job so much easier. Donna, have anything to add?
No, just really clean work by the staff, and thank you, Andy, and your team for getting that really well organized. And the auditor, I'm really pleased with the auditor. I think, Andy, you would agree, they seem to be very easy to work with. They're very thorough and complete. And they were very happy with Maher and the work they're doing. So the team we've assembled seems to be working really well. And this is going to be really important when we get ready to go in and talk about our credit rating and things, to have these clean audited financials. So thank you.
I have nothing further other than to say thanks again, Andy. And we recommend, if you're looking for a motion to approve the audited financial statements,
Thank you.
fiscal 2021, I make that motion.
Right.
San Carlos seconds.
Okay, thank you, John. Is there any questions from anyone on the board? I don't see any questions or comments. Let me just see if there's any public comment. I don't see anyone with a hand raised. If there's public comment, you can either raise your hand through reactions or speak up. Okay, could we please do a roll call, Nellie?
San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame, Colma,
Yes.
Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto, Foster City, Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos,
Yes.
Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae,
Yes.
Nellie, this is Donna. I'm sorry, I'm a yes. I just have a new system tonight and I'm not quite there. Thanks.
no problem, thank you. Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
thank you. San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco,
Yes.
and Woodside. The motion passes.
Okay, great. So the next item on the agenda is, we've now got 2 PPAs in front of us, and the first item is approval of the Eureka Solar PPA.
And
Yep,
Drake, if
and-
I can just also
Yes,
weigh in
please.
to thank Andy and his team for having the audit go so smoothly and for the clean audit, which of course was what we expected, but very easy process. And thank you for all the hard work. So yes, on to Siobhan and some PPAs tonight.
Great, thank you. Yep, I will present the first PPA for the Eureka Solar Project, and then Chelsea Keys will do the second presentation for the wind project. We can go to the next slide, please. So this is the recommendation that was in the board packet, but we're recommending approval of this PPA. It's a solar plus storage project, 15 years. We expect it to start operating around April 1, 2024. Next slide, please. We've talked about this before, but just as a reminder, oops. Oops, sorry about that. So last year we did an RFP to solicit renewable energy projects, new contracts for renewable energy that were greater than 10 years in length. We received a number of proposals for solar plus storage, wind, and a couple of offers from geothermal. Solar plus storage was one of the priorities coming out of this. The addition of storage to a solar project provides a lot of flexibility for us, which would allow us to move the middle of the day electricity into evening hours or to the times when we need it to meet our load profile. And the last bullet sort of reiterates that this will help us to meet our goal to be time coincident renewable by 2025. Next slide, please. So the project was originally called Red Bluff. It's actually been renamed now to Eureka by the counterparty. It's being developed and it's owned by Clearway Energy Group, which is a very experienced energy developer. The total project is 263 megawatts. We're going to be procuring 100 megawatts of that. And then our storage size is a 50 megawatt 4-hour lithium ion battery. So it'll be 200 megawatt hours total. And we're expecting the COD to be in April 2024. Some of the key milestones are the execution of their interconnection agreement, which is already completed, permitting, which is expected to be complete later this year, and then they'll start construction in mid-2023. The project is located in Riverside County. You can see both a picture of sort of high level on the top where it's located, and then more specifically what the project layout will look like. They are planning to, and our PPA does require that they sign a project labor agreement. And it is located in an area that's been designated as a preferred renewable energy zone. Next slide, please. So the contract structure is similar to the Chaparral project that we talked about last month, which is the other solar plus storage project that we just signed a contract for. But we'll pay for all of the solar generation at a fixed price of rate that's $1 per megawatt hour price. And then we'll pay for the use of the storage portion at $1 per kilowatt month, so based on the capacity of the storage. Neither of these prices include any escalations. The price will be flat throughout the entire 15-year term. So this helps us manage price risk in the market. And then we will procure all of the product attributes from the facility. So this will help us meet our load needs. We'll get the renewable energy to meet our RPS requirements. And then it also provides ancillary services and resource adequacy. Next slide. I mentioned this already, but the project has committed that the construction will be conducted using a project labor agreement with labor organizations. It's pretty standard for solar projects to do that, but they've committed to that in the contract. Next slide. On the environmental front, we worked when we developed the RFP with a couple of environmental organizations to evaluate the environmental impacts of these projects. As part of the RFP, we asked each project to send us a geospatial footprint of the project, and then we looked at whether or not the project was located in either a restricted or high conflict area for renewable energy. And then so for this project, we looked at the USGS protected areas database, and it's not located in a protected area. And we also looked at whether or not it was in an area that's not suitable for renewable energy, as was developed by the Renewable Energy Transmission Initiative. Next slide. And then additionally, this project is located in an area that's been identified as suitable for renewable energy based on the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan, which was a collaborative effort between a number of agencies in California to identify public lands in the desert that were sort of best suited for renewable energy development. So not only is this project not located in a sensitive habitat, it's located in an area that was identified as one of the better areas for renewable energy development. Next slide. So this is showing what the generation is going to look, we expect it to look like in each month of the year once it's fully operating. So each chart is a different month. The red line is what the generation would look like without the battery, just what the solar generation would be on its own. The blue line shows how we expect the battery to operate. And then the green line is the net generation. So for example, in April, which is the top right chart, we expect the battery to charge in the middle of the day and then discharge in the evening and overnight. In the winter months, there tends to be not quite enough solar to make the battery as effective during those months. But we do have full ability to charge and discharge the battery depending on how conditions change. So this is our current view right now, but it could change as we move closer, and we can charge and discharge the battery depending on what conditions look like in real time. Next slide. And then this is showing how this PPA will help add to our portfolio. So in here, the black squiggly line is our expected load for each month in 2025. The gray bars are the existing PPAs, and then the blue is the addition of this new contract. So you can see it's helping us to meet our load in the middle of the day, and then we can also shift some of the power to the evening hours. You can see we are a little bit over procured in some months in the middle of the day, but this we can continue to shift as we add more storage to our portfolio. Next slide. And then this is a good fit with our strategic plan. One of our top priorities is to source 100% renewable energy on a time coincident basis by 2025. And then it also fits in with our what our resources goal number 1, which is securing sufficient low cost clean sources of electricity to meet our priorities. So this is a good fit with what we want to do strategically. Next slide. All right, and this is the last slide, just reiterating the recommendation that we made earlier. So if there's any questions, happy to take those now.
If there's any questions, I see a question from Rick Benia.
I was just going to say, if there are no questions, I'll make a motion to approve.
You can make a motion to approve and there can be questions after your motion.
Thank you.
And can I get a second on that motion?
Second.
And that's from Ann Schneider. And
And I
Ann,
have a tiny comment.
you have your hand up for a comment. Go ahead.
I do. Staff, I just want to say thank you so much for the addition of the environmental attributes on it. It makes me making my decisions so much easier. So I very much appreciate it. Thank you. Job well done.
Great. Thank you, Ann.
Rick, I have a comment.
Okay, please, Pradeep.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. First comment is this is the kind of project that we should be looking forward to in the future for Peninsula Clean Energy, because this is the type of projects that will make 24/7 operation possible. Number two, I would like to also draw to attention of the board to a couple of things that are listed in the project description but may not have been registered in the presentation. One is that this project is a sort of hybrid project. In the other words, all the battery storage involved in the project would have to be done from our solar plant. We cannot charge our battery from the grid. That's the requirement. Number two, the charging of the battery and recharge and then taking the charge out to use it in our service, there'll be a 15% loss needed. In the other words, megawatt hours going into the battery will be dropped. And number three, I think this is a kind of project in which the operation of the project is very critical in terms of making the maximum use of the storage capability. And that's where I would like to ask a question from Siobhan. In terms of scheduling of the battery storage from the plant, will it be done by PCE or it'll be part of the scheduler's job to do that? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Just one clarification I want to make. We do have to charge the battery from solar exclusively for the first 5 or 6 years of the contract term, but the system will be set up to allow for grid charging after that point. So we will have the flexibility to charge it at other times to the extent we are putting renewables on the grid. And then we will be the scheduling coordinator. We generally work with an agent to do that on our behalf, but we will be the ones making the decisions on when to charge and discharge, how to schedule the project into the CAISO.
Siobhan, one more question is, what is the total RA credit that we can anticipate from both storage as well as the solar power plants?
Yeah, the solar will not have any RA credit, and the solar has been decreasing in RA credit over the years. The battery will have somewhere around 95% is what we'd expect. The total battery is the 50 megawatts is a full capacity product, but as more and more batteries are put onto the system, we're seeing how much RA credit we get decrease. And I think it'll be about 95%, but it'll depend a little bit on what the rules are in place at the time that this comes online.
Thank you, Siobhan.
Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, so I have a comment about it, Siobhan, which is, I think it's important that you were able to negotiate that after an initial period of time, we can charge the battery from the grid. I think that's flexibility that we need as we go forward. We don't exactly know how valuable that's going to be. It could be very valuable, it could be not so valuable, but I think it's important flexibility that we have. And the question for you is, how have you seen the pricing on the battery backup? we hesitated to do that initially when we did the right deal. And I know we're now in a challenging negotiations with them to get battery backup on the right project, which I expect ultimately we're going to succeed with, because it's in everybody's interest to have that happen. But have you seen the pricing come down on batteries?
Yeah, so this project was bid to us late last year, and the counterparty held firm the price that they bid to us. And it was a good price and lower than we would have seen in the years prior. I do think there might be a slight increase in prices right now and going forward because of some of the supply chain issues that we're seeing all across all industries right now. And there's also a large demand for lithium ion batteries for vehicles. So I think we have a good price for this one. And I think we saw prices going down, but we might see an increase in prices in the near future.
And it sounds like we might see a decrease in the midterm.
In the long, yeah, that's possible.
Okay. Mark. Yeah, so I need to ask for public comment, and the first public comment is from Mark Rose.
Hi. Two things. One is I think I heard $1 per megawatt hour, which is like 1/10 of a cent per kilowatt hour, which is amazing.
No.
No? Okay. And then the other thing is that, yes, I expect by late 2022 that battery prices are going to start heading down. And if they're up, they'll go back down to like $120 a kilowatt hour, probably until the next plant gets put up, which would bring them down to 100 or less per kilowatt hour.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Are there any other public comments? If anyone has a public comment, you can raise your hands by clicking on reactions, or you can just speak up. I don't see any other public comments. If there's any other question or comment from members of the board, we can take that now. I don't see any, so let's go forward with the roll call.
San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma,
Yes.
Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto, Foster City, Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos,
Yes.
Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae,
Yes.
Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo,
Yes.
thank you, South San Francisco,
Yes.
and Woodside. The motion passes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the next item on the agenda is another PPA for wind.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Chelsea Keys, the Senior Manager of Power Resources. And yes, I'm bringing to you the second PPA tonight, and that's to authorize a new PPA with Gonzaga Wind. Next slide. So our recommendation to you is to approve this PPA for renewable supply with the Gonzaga Ridge Wind Farm with a power delivery term of 15 years that will start on or about October 31st, 2024, and an amount not to exceed $204 million. Next slide. So you saw this slide, Siobhan presented this as well. This was project was also part of the RFP that PCE issued last year for longer term renewable energy. We received various proposals, but procuring wind out of this RFP was also a very high priority to staff. As many of you probably know, new wind development in the California space is very scarce. because many wind regions within the state have already been developed. So looking for new wind resources is sometimes difficult. This resource will help PCE meet our 24/7 renewable goal in 2025. Next slide. So a little bit about the project. The developer is Scout Clean Energy, who has experience with many wind resources that they're developing around the country. The counterparty is Gonzaga Wind Farm, who we're signing the PPA with. The location of this resource is actually very interesting. It's located actually in the Pacheco State Park. Actually, if you look at the picture here on the right, you'll probably notice, if you can see, Gonzaga Wind is actually about 10 miles from Wright Solar, which is actually quite interesting. So Gonzaga would be the second project near Los Panos to directly serve the customers that we have there. So some of you probably remember when you were going to go visit Wright Solar for the groundbreaking, you probably saw a lot of wind turbines in the distance, and that is the existing facility at the where Gonzaga Ridge will replace those. So when the new facility gets put into place, PCE will receive 76 megawatts. The total planned capacity for the whole project is 197. Our contract is for 15 years. Again, it will start on or around October 31st, 2024. They have received their CEQA environmental impact report in August of 2020, and they have received an environmental assessment finding that there's no significant impact of the project. In this project, we'll also use a union labor agreement under their contractor. Next slide. So a little bit more about the layout of the site itself. As I mentioned, it is within the Pacheco State Park. Right now, there's an existing 18.4 megawatt wind project. It's about 162 turbines. It was built in the 1980s. So that facility will be deconstructed prior to the construction of Gonzaga, and it will be roughly 25, possibly a little bit more turbines to take its place. So you can just see like how wind turbines have scaled these days versus when they first started. And the last note I have here is that while it's not listed as an EPA repower site, it is on land designated for wind energy development because there is already a project there. Next slide. So a little bit about the structure. The contract term is for 15 years. We will pay for the output of the wind generation portion for the project at a fixed rate per megawatt hour. There's no escalation in the contract. And then PCE is entitled to all the project attributes, including energy, renewable energy, and then the resource adequacy. And then we will be the scheduling coordinator for the facility. Next slide. And regarding the labor, the project is committed to constructing the project using union labor. It is a little bit different than your typical 5-party PLA solar union agreement that you typically see for solar. Rather, instead, they'll use their contractor who already has an agreement in place with national labor unions. We're finding that this is a bit more common with new wind resources. The relevant trades that will be included within this agreement will include iron workers, carpenters, millwrights, laborers, and operators. Additionally, they have committed to using electrical subcontractors that are signatory to the IBEW group. Next slide. So Siobhan showed this slide before, so I'll just hit on just a couple of the topics here. But as she mentioned, we set up a system to evaluate the resources that were bid into our RFP. We looked at whether they were located on protected areas. We identified if they were going to impact endangered species or different habitats. And for this particular project, the analysis showed that it was not located on a protected area, and it wasn't located in an area not suitable for renewable energy development. Next slide. So a little bit about the permitting. The California Department of Parks and Rec was the lead agency for the CEQA process. And the environmental impact report was completed in August of 2020. A conditional use permit was actually not required by the state park. The Bureau of Reclamation conducted a finding of no significant impact, declaring that the project will have no significant impact on the environment, and that was completed in January of 2021. Next slide. So this shows the generation profile of Gonzaga. The top left shows January, bottom right shows December. So you can see just by the profile that it provides valuable nighttime generation, which we definitely need within our portfolio. Next slide. And then again, we wanted to show you how Gonzaga looks in blue compared to our existing PPA portfolio in gray. So you can see it's little bars in various months for what it looks like. And then the next slide, because we're bringing to you 2 PPAs tonight, we wanted to make sure that we show you what the existing PPA portfolio looks like in gray, with Eureka in yellow and then Gonzaga in green, showing the monthly profile. Next slide. And then similar to our other project that we brought to you, it's a great fit for our strategic plan to meet our 100% renewable energy goal. It meets the power resources goal number 1 to secure sufficient low cost, clean sources of electricity. Next slide. And again, this just reiterates our recommendation to you all. And then last slide, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Muted. Okay, I've got a couple questions. Let's start with Ann Schneider.
Thank you, Chair. Question about wind. I understand that this isn't going to be an endangered species habitat, et cetera, but with wind, the type of wind has different wind systems have different impacts on birds and I'm forgetting my other animal, bats, birds and bats. So would it be possible, possibly if you could explain on this system, what type of wind power they're planning on installing, and then maybe in the future when wind power comes to us, just a little discussion of the technology as it impacts animals that fly.
Yeah, great question. It's a little bit like too soon to say because they're still going through and selecting the turbine sizes, and they haven't selected them quite yet because they won't be starting construction until late 2023. I do know that they're discussing some pretty sizable turbines around like a 6 megawatt range. So I know looking at some of the environmental reports, it shows that, you know, going from like 162 turbines down to around 40, that should make a significant impact in terms of, you know, less impact on the land and potentially even the birds and other habitat around there.
Plus, I have to admit that I don't know if the birds are learning and the bats are learning. I've some ancillary thing on bats, but just if you can help keep us informed. So we're trying to make the best choice, and that the people that come to us responding to a request, that they know that we are interested in the technology that will be least damaging. I know that we're going to lose some birds with wind and tortoises with desert soil, but we can try to minimize even when it is in open areas.
Yes, happy to. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Tom Faria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very pleased to see that they're taking out the old turbines and putting in new ones. I grew up in Tracy, and I watched the Altamont there. The older turbines ran faster, the blades turned faster and created bigger problems for birds and bats. The new turbines I've been seeing turn quite slowly, and they use with gearing systems. I'm assuming that's what they'll be using here too. And so it has a much less, much impact, from what I know, much decreased impact on the birds and the bats. Also, the I understand that there's, I don't know what, maybe speak to the expected lifespan of the turbines and, how long they expect them to run before they have to be replaced. And then one final comment, I'm very pleased to see this happening, not only is it in our neighborhood, but Los Banos endures a great deal of wind, particularly in the spring months. We always get some breezes in the summer evenings, but from about March through June, it's usually windy a lot. So I'm glad to see us tapping that natural power for our supply.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Pradeep.
Thank you, Rick. The question I have for Chelsea is that the plot you showed for monthly impact of those two projects,
You're breaking up, Pradeep.
Right in assume. I'm sorry?
You were breaking up.
Hello?
Go ahead, start over.
Oh, I'm just asking Chelsea if the chart that she showed about monthly impacts of these two projects is without any operation of the battery storage in the summer months. I just wanted to get her reaction to that.
Yeah, it does include some analysis behind that. It would be shifting some of the generation, particularly from the solar that it's storing, into some later hours. And like Siobhan mentioned, that we do, recognize as we're building our portfolio that there is some months that do have some, we'll have some excess. So we'll need to procure more storage to be able to move that to later hours.
Of course, thank you.
Just to follow up on that, Chelsea, just to clarify, there isn't any storage directly related to this wind project.
Correct, there is not.
Okay, great. Rick Benny.
Not for our portion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to tack a little bit on regarding the rotors themselves. When I saw wind coming up in this location, I called my friends at the millwrights, and they told me that they asked me how many. They said if it's like 6 or 7 megawatts, I think, then the ring span is about, or the diameter is 200 feet, and it turns very slowly. So Tom was right on that. And it's that slow moving, which is geared and still produces a lot of energy, that gives it the ability to protect the birds. They can see those things moving much more better. So thank you.
Through the chair, thank you.
Great. Okay, are there any other questions from members of the board? I don't see any, so I will take public comment. And I have a comment from Mark Roost.
All right, first of all, that wind profile is a beautiful classic Sassoon wind, the west wind. They did a thesis on that in 1975. And the different kinds of turbine technologies that would be in the 6 megawatt range are pretty much a 3-bladed horizontal axis. For smaller things, they might use the Darius, the egg beater one, which would be a lot more hazardous, I think, for anything flying near it. So this is probably good. And there's also things that are done to warn birds or to, to get, that sort of thing. I guess that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark. I don't see any other public comment. If anyone has a public comment, they can click on reactions and raise your hand. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Tom Faria, sorry.
So I have a motion from Tom Faria and a second from Julia Meeks. Could we please do a roll call? I have a question from Rick Benia.
Yeah, just one final comment. When I saw both of these projects coming up, and I saw the labor arrangements that were made in the negotiation, I was really very happy to see that. It appears really that these projects is being recognized. They require trained and skilled professionals. The millwrights who actually install and service turbines are highly skilled professionals. If anybody ever wants to check them out, look at their website. It's the Millwrights Local 102. just look it up. It's really interesting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Could we please do a roll call?
San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma,
Yes.
Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto, Foster City, Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos,
Yes.
Menlo Park,
Yes.
Millbrae,
Yes.
Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco,
Yes.
and Woodside. The motion passes.
Okay, great. I think that the next item on the agenda is item 11, which is the item dealing with hiring GCAP services to provide consulting with regard to the diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion issue.
This will be presented by Shana Barnes, and I want to thank Shana for all of her work on this. She will be the project manager for this effort. But I also wanted to thank the board subcommittee, who has invested a lot of time interviewing the top firms for this project, discussing the options and coming up with the recommendations. It was a lot of work, and that board subcommittee consisted of Donna Colson from Burlingame, Michael Smith, the alternate from Redwood City, Rod Das Magbul from Bailey City, Sam Hindi from Foster City, and Carlos Romero from East Palo Alto. So thank you to all of you for your time and effort. And also thank you to PCE staff, Shana, Andy, Kirsten, Matthew. I think those were the main folks working on this. It was quite the effort. So Shana will be leading the effort as we move forward on this project. So take it away, Shana.
Great, and I just want to underscore for members of the board, please be aware that your alternate can serve on these subcommittees. Michael Smith was a real contributor, a really serious contributor to this subcommittee. So if you have an alternate that wants to be more involved, they're welcome to participate in a subcommittee. Shana, you're muted.
Great. I think there's a hand up from Giselle Hale, but okay, I think it went down. Thank you. My name is Shana. I'll be giving this presentation tonight on diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion contract approval. So here's our recommendation. We are recommending approval of a resolution delegating authority to the Chief Executive Officer to execute an agreement with GCAP Services, Inc., an amount not to exceed $175,650 for diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion consulting services. So here's our agenda. We'll start off with some background, including the Citizens Advisory Committee draft equity statement. And then we'll move on to our new compliance reporting obligations regarding DEAI under Senate Bill 255. We'll then describe the DEAI RFP process and then provide some information about the selected consultant GCAP services. So for background, in July 2020, the CAC formed an equity working group with the primary task of ensuring equity as the priority across all working groups and built into PCE strategic priorities. The CAC's draft equity statement was accepted by the board of directors at your January 28th meeting. And it was also included in your packet for tonight in the memo for this item. At that meeting, our board formed a subcommittee to work with the CAC to build on the draft equity statement and create a DEAI organizational statement, policy, and action plan for Peninsula Clean Energy. So now I'll provide some background on another piece of the puzzle here as we move forward with the DEAI project, and it's regarding our regulatory compliance obligations regarding DEAI. So that would be Senate Bill 255. It was signed by Governor Newsom in late 2019, and it requires community choice aggregators like Peninsula Clean Energy to annually submit a detailed and verifiable plan for increasing procurement from small, local, and diverse business enterprises. And it requires us to file a yearly report that details our activities supporting diverse business enterprises in the prior year, and also our procurement spending to those enterprises. It does this by updating the Public Utilities Code and bringing us into the fold of the CPUC's Utility Supplier Diversity Program. This program focuses on the positive downstream economic effects of including diverse businesses in utility supply chains, and has historically focused on private investor-owned utilities procurement, but now also focuses on CCAs as well. So this was another consideration that staff and the board subcommittee had to consider when drafting the RFP and selecting the consultant team to carry out the DEAI work. So now I'll describe the DEAI RFP process. The DEAI RFP was released as a competitive solicitation in early May 2021. Responses were due in mid-June 2021, and we received 8 proposals, 7 of which were complete. The DEAI subcommittee interviewed the top 3 finalists in early and mid-July, and staff posed additional questions from the subcommittee to the top 2 finalists in early August. The board subcommittee and staff had follow-up meetings with the top 2 finalists in late September and early October, and the consensus was finally reached on the top consultant, GCAP Services, on October 15th, so about 2 weeks ago. And now I'll provide some information about the selected consultant, GCAP Services, and Rosales Business Partners, who is their subcontractor for this engagement. So GCAP Services is a minority business enterprise certified professional consulting firm headquartered in Costa Mesa, California. 75% of their employees are minority and/or women, and they have over 22 years experience providing management, assessment, benchmarking, training, and support in a wide variety of DEAI work areas. They were actually hired by the CPUC to implement this supplier diversity program, which is the program that I mentioned earlier that PCE has to comply with. And they provide overall strategic and compliance related support services to the CPUC and make sure that the program fully complies with the applicable regulations. Other work includes working with the San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG, to develop their DEI department. They also work with Caltrans to conduct a disparity study on the utilization of minority and women-owned businesses in contracting. And another project they did was working with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California on diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting services strategic plan. So the subcontractor for this engagement is Rosales Business Partners, or RBP. And RBP is a San Francisco-based consulting firm focused on DEAI regarding internal and external workforce policies and programs. Mara Rosales is the managing partner for RBP and co-lead on the Peninsula Clean Energy engagement, and notably served as general counsel for the SF International Airport earlier in her career. In this role, Ms. Rosales was actively involved in the strategic planning and direction of key SFO projects, including negotiating the airport's precedent-setting project labor agreement, worker retention, and labor peace policies, with a focus to ensure equitable inclusion of minority, women, and economically disadvantaged individuals. In her capacity as an attorney, Ms. Rosales is a subject matter expert in Proposition 209, which as a public entity, Peninsula Clean Energy has to comply with. Other projects for RBP include supporting the Port of San Francisco with the creation of a racial equity policy, and working with the SFMTA to conduct a disadvantaged business enterprise availability, utilization, and disparity study. So that was a little bit about our contractor and subcontractor that we're recommending tonight. And that'll bring us back to our recommendation, and we are looking for an action from the board tonight. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments as well.
Yeah, and I would welcome any comments from members of the board committee that worked with staff in the course of this. I know that there were a lot of meetings, and the committee worked really hard. Giselle.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't on the committee. Would it be all right if I spoke, or would you prefer to start with the committee members?
It's fine. Go ahead, Giselle.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to reiterate the offer to start on a committee. I feel like it's now a Redwood City tradition. When I was an alternate, I did 2 committees, and it's just such a great way for alternates to get up and running at PCE, because it is such a technical board. And so it was really grateful to Donna when she reached out to Michael to get him involved. And Michael just worked on our DEI plan in Redwood City. If you may have seen the news, this Monday, we passed our plan and it was really significant. One of the things that we're doing is that every single staff report will reference one of our equity principles and how it is working towards those principles. So I think this work is evolving quickly and we're seeing all the ways that it can be integrated into everything we do. And I'm really excited about the vendor that was chosen. They, you know, this looks like a great option. Excited to hear more from the committee and grateful for their work, and mostly really excited to get this work underway. So I'm grateful that we've prioritized this as an organization. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Giselle. Donna.
Thank you, Chair DeGolia. I just wanted to, again, reiterate the hard work the committee did and how many hours they spent meeting and talking to these people to try to find the right match. And the work that Shana and staff did as well. You know, it was not easy. That's why it took us so long. It took us several months to work through all these different options and talk to all these teams and make sure that we had a really good match. So I'm very pleased, as well as Director Hales mentions, this is just a really good organization. They have a local presence in San Francisco, and I think they're going to do great work for us. And they're really going to be able to balance her experience, particularly with the unions and working with the PLAs and the union labor agreements, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, to me was one of the strong salient points of this organization and a really good reason to retain them. I also do want to acknowledge that the CACs kind of kicked this off, and I hope they'll continue to follow along and participate, because you know, they were the ones who really sort of brought this up to us as a really critical element of our business operations. So a big thank you to them.
Great, thank you. Rod.
Thank you, Rick. I just want to first thank the staff, Shana, Kristen, Andy, Jan, for your patience. I know we had some very, very elevated conversations, enriching conversations, conversations that, you know, are uncomfortable. But I think out of this tension, we came to a conclusion where we can find a vendor that can take what we do and be a precedent for many CUCs across the state. And I just want to thank, again, Shana, Kristen, Andy, Jan, Donna, thank you. I feel like I've been able to create relationships through this work, and with Michael, Carlos, and Sam, it just allowed me to feel like I've grown into this position and have some sort of like ownership or like some sort of like stake in PCE, and I'm really, really happy with our decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. Just to reiterate for the board, the subcommittee was Rod, Sam, Carlos, Donna, and Michael Smith, I think. Am I missing anyone, Donna? Yeah. And they had, I would say, 4 meetings, maybe 5. There were a lot of meetings that this subcommittee did. It was a tortuous effort, but it was the patience and the focus of the subcommittee is really to be commended. And just like Rod said, this is the way that you really get to know the organization. We all know that this organization is doing important things and has the potential to do really game-changing things in this state. And this committee has been a really serious contributor. So I want to thank all of them for the hard work that they did. And that's not to underscore the hard work that staff did. It's just that the board members really stepped up on this. So thank you. I don't see any other questions or comments from members of the board. If anyone, wait, I just saw a hand either come up or go away. Rick Bonilla.
Yeah, thank you. So I think this is great work too, and I'm very proud that PCE has undertaken this. I'm just wondering, is this a new policy? Because I'm looking at our policies and I don't see it. Is it going to be a policy?
I can answer that, Rick. So
Yeah,
yes, thank you. Director Bonilla for asking the question, because that's exactly what I was sort of waiting to add on, which is there will be this was just the process, the 2 or 3 month long process just to hire the consultant. We had a lot of incredibly talented and different kinds of consultants that came in. So we really did a lot of research on who to hire. So now what the plan is to develop both the policy, the DEAI policy, to bring, of course, we'll use a subcommittee on that. Subcommittee will continue to work on that. We'll bring back a policy for board discussion and then ultimately approval, which will also include an implementation plan and then recommendations for ongoing monitoring, both to comply with state law and to comply with our own internal policies that we develop. And we'll need, probably at the end, there might be even some sort of a dashboard that tells us, you know, how we're doing. And it ranges on everything from, you know, hiring and making sure we don't have biases in our hiring practices and promotion practices, to making sure we don't have biases in our actual programs that we're putting in place, as well as our procurement. So it's a multifaceted, somewhat complex, you know, overview. And I'm guessing it will take us at least another 6 months to complete the work. So it'll be something in 2022.
So thank you very much, Donna. I'm really looking forward to seeing this roll out. And I want to offer my most sincere appreciation to you and the rest of the subcommittee that did this work. It's very important. Thank you.
Great. Anybody else from the board have a question or comment? I don't see any.
Rick, Harvey's waving his hand there.
Yeah.
Oh, Harvey, great. Go ahead, Harvey.
My alternate, I think, would be a perfect match for this subcommittee. Are you still looking for members?
Well, this subcommittee has deeply engaged in the issue, but I would recommend that your alternate talk to Donna. Donna's been very involved in the subcommittee and she can give some direction on that.
I will do that. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I wanted to make the comment about how alternates can be involved because they were so instrumental in this subcommittee, and alternates have been very important in other subcommittees. So I just wanted to encourage our board members to think about that so that their alternates can get engaged, because it is, we all know it's a technical business. Okay, I will take public comment on this matter. I have one from who else but Mark Roost.
Yeah, I just want to say that that dashboard idea can have all kinds of positive impacts in terms of different audiences for PCE, internal and external. So think about using that dashboard creatively, or just simply having it be there as this is what we're up to, and this is our flag planted in the ground.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
Welcome.
Are there any other public comments? Okay, I don't see any. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution?
Motion to approve.
That's a motion from Rod.
Yes.
Second.
And a second from Harvey. If we could have a roll call, that'd be great, Nellie.
San Mateo County,
Yes.
San Mateo County, Atherton,
Yes.
Belmont,
Yes.
Brisbane,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Colma,
Yes.
Daly City,
Yes.
East Palo Alto, Foster City, Half Moon Bay,
Yes.
Hillsborough,
Yes.
Los Banos. We'll circle back. Menlo Park,
Yes.
There we
Milbright?
Los Banos, yes. Sorry, I lost my button.
Thank you. Milbright,
Yes.
Pacifica,
Yes.
Portola Valley,
Yes.
Redwood City,
Yes.
San Bruno,
Yes.
San Carlos,
Yes.
San Mateo,
Yes.
South San Francisco,
Yes.
and Woodside. The motion passes.
Okay, great. The next item on the agenda is an update on the California Community Power Long-Term Storage Project.
Yep, and I will be talking about this one, and this one actually is not an action, it's just a discussion item. We're just providing an update today.
Right.
Next slide, please. So the objective today is provide some background on the long duration storage RFO, how we evaluated projects, how we shortlisted projects, the negotiation process. And this is to support at a future board meeting, the approval of one of the long duration storage projects that we've been negotiating an agreement with. Next slide, please. So this is going over the objectives and the requirements for the long duration storage RFO. We were trying to procure cost-effective long duration storage that would help us to integrate our renewables and also support grid reliability. We did this joint procurement with a number of other CCAs so that we could share the resources and also share the risk of the project. This was also intended to help us meet future, at the time they were future IRP procurement mandates. They have now become actual IRP procurement mandates. And I'll talk about that later in the presentation. We were technology and location agnostic. Most CCAs did have the desire to look at emerging technologies. And we wanted what were called full toll agreements, which means we would get the capacity or resource adequacy value as well as the energy. So we would be the scheduling coordinator and we would be able to dispatch the batteries to the way we wanted to. Some of the requirements of the RFO were that the resources were located in the California independent system operator location, or they were imported to California with dynamic transfer rights. We wanted to make sure we could get the resource adequacy capabilities. We also needed a minimum of 8-hour duration. We wanted the COD to be no later than June 1, 2026, with a minimum delivery term of 10 years. And we asked for a 50 megawatt size as the minimum. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the background. We started this process in June of 2020. We initially did a request for information with a group of CCAs, and this was to help inform the integrated resource plans that we were required to submit in August of 2020. Following up on the RFI, we did issue a request for offers in October 2020, looking for up to 500 megawatts of long duration storage. At the time that we issued the RFO, CC Power was not an entity yet. CC Power was actually formed in February 2021. In June of 2021, we shortlisted the projects from the RFO and started negotiations. Also in June of 2021, this is when the CPUC issued the IRP procurement order that requires us to procure some long duration storage to meet this compliance requirement. And then in October 2021, we've started the approval process for the top project coming out of this process. And we'll go into details on each of these in the next slides. So next, please. So digging into the RFO timeline a little bit, we issued the RFO in October with a submission deadline of December 1, 2020. And then we did about 6 months of analysis among the CCAs that were participating. This is longer than I think it would normally take any one individual CCA, partially because this was the first RFO of its type for long duration storage. So there's some work we had to do on how do we evaluate the various projects appropriately. And then this is the first time that this group of CCAs are working together. So we also had to negotiate how to work together. So we completed our shortlisting in mid-May, and then we started negotiations, and those continued throughout the summer. One of the top projects is just about complete with negotiations. And so in October, we started the contract approval process. And for CC Power, that requires a 60-day notice that they're considering a contract approval. That started earlier this month. And then they would have a vote to approve the contract in December. And then each CCA board will have the ability to approve, I think, up until February of next year. Next slide, please. So when we received the offers, we received quite a number of offers. We received offers that could come online as early as 2023. We received offers from 51 different entities with a total of 221 different pricing offers. We had 8 sort of buckets of technology types in 18 different distinct technologies. And those are shown on the right-hand side of the slide. And then we also received a variety of durations for these projects, from 8 hours, which was the minimum we asked for, up to a multi-day discharge duration. Next slide, please. Out of those 221 offers, we identified 98 primary offers. And we narrowed this down based on only accepting offers that were conforming to the bid requirements. And then we looked at the lowest price and the shortest delivery terms. Next slide, please. And then for those 98 offers, we had a 2-round evaluation process. The first round, we looked at the expected value of each project. And then we looked at the locational value, where it's located on the grid. We evaluated project risk and how well it could help us meet our resource adequacy requirements. We did a technology viability, particularly for those emerging technologies. And then we also looked at labor and environmental parameters. And from this, we narrowed down that list of 98 to a top 17. Next slide, please. So this top 17 was made up of a combination of lithium ion and emerging technologies. When we received the offers, the majority of them were lithium ion batteries. So 56 out of the 98 primary offers were lithium ion. But because we had a desire to look at emerging technologies, we reserved 7 of the 17 spots for emerging technologies and allocated those to the highest scoring non-lithium ion projects. Next slide, please. So for the 17 projects that we moved to the second round of the evaluation process, we did a more specific modeling on NPV, and we also did stochastic modeling, so looking at a variety of simulations. We did a deeper dive on location and interconnection risk. We evaluated plans for project labor agreements. We did a deeper dive on environmental. And then for the emerging technologies, we also did a more specific viability assessment, and we had deeper dive interviews with each of those emerging technology providers. So the non-lithium ion emerging technologies that we looked at were second life EV batteries, gravity systems, hydrogen, liquid air, compressed air, iron redox flow, and pumped storage. Next slide, please. When we looked at the project value, we assumed that the costs were fixed. So the contract price itself would be fixed over the life of the contract, except for that a couple of projects included a variable operating component, which generally said if you operate the project more often or in this way, there would be a higher cost. And then we looked at the value we could get both from resource adequacy as well as from arbitrage, from how we dispatched the battery into the grid. The expected values ranged from negative to marginally positive, but were highly variable, and there's a lot of uncertainty over time. Some of the things that impacted this a lot were location. and then also how we plan to operate the storage, how much of it is how it's getting bid into the market. And then we also assumed that the ancillary service value would decrease over time. And then finally, we assigned resource adequacy value, but this is very dependent on how the RA regulatory structure continues to develop in the future. Next slide, please. So from the 17 projects, we developed a 2-tier shortlist. The top tier, tier 1, were the projects that scored the highest and received the most confidence when we looked at some of the risk factors. And then tier 2 were the lower scoring projects. But this allowed us to provide some additional capacity in case any projects dropped out of this evaluation process. But our negotiations focused on the tier 1 projects. Next slide, please. So this is a complicated slide that's trying to demonstrate how the contracts will work between CC Power, the developer or owner of the project, and the CCAs that are going to be participating in the project. So in the middle, we have the Energy Storage Services Agreement. This will be signed between CC Power and the project owner or developer. And then to the right of that box, we have what's called the Project Participant Share Agreement. This will be signed by the 7 CCAs that will be participating in this project and CC Power.
Will be determined by what happens in the next.
And this project participation agreement is going to determine, it lays out how each of us make payments and sort of some of the credit requirements behind the energy storage agreement. And then we will also sign among all of us a operating agreement. And that will determine how we operate the project, how we make decisions among the 7 CCAs to operate the project. And then the last contract at the bottom is what's called a buyer liability pass-through agreement. And that's a guarantee that each CCA is making to CC Power and the developer that we will stand behind the payments for our share of the project. Next slide. So the 7 CCAs that have decided to move forward with this procurement are listed here. So Silicon Valley, Clean Energy, Clean Power, San Francisco, San Jose, Redwood Coast, Sonoma Clean Power, and Valley Clean Energy, along with ourselves. Next slide. So I'm going to get here a little bit into more detail on the IRP procurement mandate that came out in June of this year. This was adopted by the CPUC on June 24th, and it requires load serving entities across the state to collectively procure 11,500 megawatts of NQC, and NQC is net qualifying capacity, which means how much RA value will we get from these resources. It's a follow-on to a decision in 2019 that mandated 3,300 megawatts of procurement for 2021 to 2023. This procurement mandate is requiring us to sign contracts that are at least 10 years long, and that 11,500 megawatts was allocated to each LSE based on load share. And then resources must be zero emission or RPS eligible. We're not allowed to procure any fossil resources. We obviously wouldn't want to anyway. And then 4,500 of the megawatts are subject to specific category requirements. I think we have that on the next slide. Yep. So this shows the requirements across all LSEs for that total 11,500. We're required to start procuring in 2023, and then we have to finalize all of our resources by 2026. And what I've circled is that there is a requirement for LSEs to procure 1,000 megawatts of long duration storage resources by 2026. There's an option to request an extension to 2028 if you are making progress but haven't finalized your contract for long duration storage. We don't think we'll need to do that. And then I'll also point out that right above the long duration storage, there's 1,000 megawatts of firm zero emitting resources. And that's what the RFO was that Jan mentioned during her report that we just put out last week. So working to work with CC Power for that as well. And that'll be primarily from resources like geothermal. Next slide, please. So then this is showing what PCE's specific requirements are. So coming out of this procurement mandate, we are required to get 19 megawatts of long duration storage resources by 2026. All right, next slide. So as I mentioned, the 19 megawatts is not the nameplate capacity, it's the net qualifying capacity. So how much RA value will we get for the resource? And so these are 8-hour batteries. And so the likely NQC that we'll receive is the 78.2% that's highlighted in red on the table. So we need to buy more than 19 megawatts nameplate capacity to get to that full requirement. Next slide, please. So this is showing the obligation for the 7 participating CCAs. We're second on this list. So our NQC allocation is 19 megawatts, but because of the NQC requirement, we would actually have to procure 24.3 megawatts of nameplate capacity due to that 78% capacity back, net qualifying capacity. Next slide. So the project that is our top project is called the Tumbleweed Project. It's being developed by a company called LS Power. It's a 69 megawatt project, 8 hours of duration, so 552 megawatt hours. It's a tolling agreement, so we'll get the resource adequacy value as well as the ability to dispatch the storage into the market. It's located near Rosamond in Kern County. It's a lithium ion battery with the COD in middle of 2024. And it's a 15-year term with a fixed $ per kilowatt month contract cost. Next slide. So we've allocated the 69 megawatts of the project based on our capacity procurement allocation. So across all of the CCAs, we have 96.5 that we need to procure. PCE is 19, which is about 20%. So we'll receive 20% of the 69 megawatts, which is 13.6 megawatts. Next slide, please. So this is some more detail on the approval process that I mentioned at the beginning of the agreement. So the first step was that in October, the CC Power Board had to issue a 60-day notice to consider the energy storage service agreement for approval. Right now, we are finalizing the contracts, and then we'd expect the CC Power Board to approve the contract in December 8th. And then CCAs have until March 2022 to get each of their individual board approvals. And the contract with the project will state that it is not effective until it receives all of the appropriate CCA board approvals. Next slide. And so then for us, what our approval process is going to look like, we gave a background on the project to the executive committee earlier this month. We're going to provide this background tonight to the full board. Next week, we'll meet with a procurement ad hoc subcommittee to go into some more details on the project. In November, we can provide any updates to the executive committee, and then we plan to bring this to the board, full board in November to vote on how we should vote for CC Power to participate and how we should vote for Peninsula Clean Energy to participate. And then in December, we can report back on the status of the CC Power vote. Next slide. So just in summary, the NPV is highly uncertain, both based on how market conditions look as well as regulatory structures. But we are required to procure this long duration storage. The Tumbleweed Project will help us to meet a good amount of the requirement that we have. And so it was the top project coming out of the RFO where we had very good participation. I think this is our last slide. You can take any questions.
Rick, you're muted.
You're right. Sorry about that. Siobhan, my question is on item number 4. The COD is 2024. The assessment that you gave us showed that for long-term storage that there would be reduction over time in the credit that we'd get. And in 2026, it would be 78.2, but it should be higher in 2024. And if our COD is 2024, why aren't we getting the higher credit?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are, the information that was initially put out by the CPUC was not very clear on this, about whether you would receive the ELCC for the year in which your project started operating, or whether it was based on the tranche that your project was meeting. And so because the long duration storage is meeting the 2026 tranche, the initial communication we've gotten from the CPUC in trying to clarify this is that it would only count for the lower ELCC factor.
That sounds like a typical CPUC bureaucratic conclusion. Okay, I've got a comment from Rick Bonilla.
Thank you very much. I want to say that I have followed this process very closely at California Community Power, and this has been a really detailed and in-depth and serious project that I think is going to bring major change to the way we're able to do business as a group of CCAs, which have assembled themselves into CCP now. We were successful early on developing a project policy for this purchase regarding labor and environment, and very happy with that. And now we're looking forward to actually completing a labor and environmental policy going into the future, which is actually the one that we spoke about last, I think, December, when we spoke about it and we asked Jan to pursue that policy. So all in all, I really approve of this. It's a great project. Look forward to it coming to fruition. I want to thank Siobhan and Jan, everybody that worked so hard on making this happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. John.
Siobhan, I think I noticed that Marine Clean Energy wasn't on the list of CCAs participating in this. Is that right? And if so, do you have any sense of what they're doing for this requirement for the CPUC?
Yeah, they, I'm not sure what their plans are. They participated early on in the process and then over the summer decided they didn't want to continue. But I don't know what their plans are.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the board? I don't see any at this time, so I will take public comments. I have a public comment from Mark Roos.
Thank you. So what are is there a way we can find out what the costs per kilowatt hour are? And what about distributed storage taken primarily? I mean, is this a possibility for later, for other procurements under the same charge? What about distributed solar storage taken primarily from photovoltaic and demand response from truck and bus storage, especially from ports and schools? Can excess storage primarily for self-use but available through demand response be used? And when do you expect Tumbleweed to buy the batteries for their commitment?
Yep, so I don't think distributed storage will work based on the requirements of this procurement mandate, which requires everything to be connected into CAISO and to operate in a way that would provide resource adequacy value. So I don't think that distributed storage would work for this particular procurement mandate.
Okay.
And then I don't know exactly the timeline for procuring their batteries. The required online date is in 2024. So I'd expect sometime in 2023 that they would make those procurements, but I don't know their exact timeline.
Okay. And for other needs, I wonder if PCE could consider using excess storage that's primarily, basically available storage, because I think that we're going to see a pattern in which there are large amounts of stationary storage and large amounts of solar in order to provide full support to both the buildings and all the vehicles associated with them, in fleets especially, but also in multifamily residential and things like that. So what I'm sort of asking is if we could start thinking about whether demand response from that sort of situation, contracts could start to be looked at as a possibility.
Yeah, we do have the one contract with Sunrun that we signed last year that focuses a lot on distributed storage. And then our programs and distributed generation team are looking at a lot of other options for how we could work with distributed storage resources and demand response.
I've got a couple of things brewing that I'd like to talk with them about, so I'd welcome them contacting me.
Okay.
Okay, is there any other public comment? I don't see any. Oh, okay, so this was informational and we will bring it back to the board when we're ready with a contract on the Tumbleweed deal, assuming that that's the first deal. That's it for the action items on the board. The next item on the agenda is member reports. Does any board member have a report?
I do.
Tom?
Yeah, we're very pleased to finally get our community outreach person in place, Sandra Benetti. She's been an employee for Los Banos, the city of Los Banos for many years, and she's outstanding, and I know she's going to do a great job. One of the things that has nothing to do with PCE, but the relationship between us and San Francisco. I see there's a new restaurant open in San Francisco called Miller and Lux. Miller and Lux headquarters is Los Banos, and I think Henry Miller is buried in Colma. So I think when Kirsten had dinner over here and had lunch over here in Los Banos at España's, that was Henry Miller's headquarters, Canal Farm Inn. So anyway, our relationship just keeps growing through the centuries, I guess.
Very good. Okay, Ann Schneider.
Thank you, Chair. I may have mentioned this the last time. I serve on a statewide commission looking at markets for recyclables and handling things like the cleanup legislation for 1383. I have asked, and the commission has agreed to add to our work plan for this fiscal year to look at various forms of biomass and to try to rank what might be good and what might be bad. This pulls us into the world of green chemistry and plastic industries who like to say, well, they convert it to a liquid, so then they're not really burning it when they ultimately burn it. So it may take a while, but we're going to be working on that.
Okay, great, thank you.
And it's mainly because I perceive that a lot of CCAs will be looking at biomass. It was discussed, I think, last month at the CCA. So we just want to try to provide some guidance for the good activities versus the bad ones.
I think it's important, Ann. Biomass, we've had conversation about that on the board, and it showed up in our power content label. So I think that's important.
Well, and the other thing that came out of a discussion this week on all of us having to comply with our 1383 compost procurement, the procurement of biomethane from solid waste resources does give us a credit. So for my city, South City, Brisbane, yay for us, we get a little credit. But my impression is that almost every city in the state will be having a hard time trying to find compost and utilize what they're going to be told they have to utilize. So we're in that transition phase. Thank you. Oh, and my alternate, Ruben Holliber, if any of you know Councilman, former Mayor Holliber, he and his wife had a baby last week. So we're welcoming Nolan Theodore Holliber to the world.
Great. Okay, any other board reports? Well, I can report that for the last 2.5 years, Atherton has been very focused on building a new town center. Our staff moved into that town center this week, and this town center has no methane gas connection to it. It is 100% electricity. Oh. Okay, everybody, thank you very much. We will see you, if not at a committee meeting earlier, we'll see you at the next board meeting on November 18th. Bye-bye.
Night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Night.